Hello everyone and welcome to yet another Magicka Templar DPS build for one Tamriel. This time we're going to be focusing on the ranged Magicka Templar DPS. The ranged Magicka Templar can put out just as much, if not more damage as a Magicka sorc, and a lot more damage than a Magicka nightblade. Magicka nightblades are suffering this patch, they need a buff, which is why some of our damage dealers that used to play Magicka Templar are switching to ranged Templar and ranged sorc. So let's get right into it. The character stats, our main bar, our Destro bar is almost at 40k Magicka, just over 18k health, 65% crit, and almost 2200 spell damage. We are using max health and Magicka buff food, still running the Thief Mundus, and still a vampire for the recovery and the undeath passive. This is very important, it helps a lot and saves our lives sometimes. As far as the potions, we're still using the same spell power, spell crit potions. Don't ever use entropy, don't rely on group buffs or igneous weapons and things like that. Always use these for endgame content. As far as our gear goes, our main 5-piece is Burning Spellweave. This set is really strong this patch. You can farm it in City of Ash 1. Even on normal mode it does drop, so do farm this. It's a lot of damage. Another nice set to use when you do have a good trial guild or trial group with solid Warhorn rotation is Mother Sorrow. This puts out a ton of damage because of the spell crit. And lastly, of course, you can use Twiceborn Star. It's always an excellent set, not much of a DPS loss, and does give you extra health. You'll be sitting at 20k health if you do use Twiceborn Star. So if you're just starting out, I do recommend going with Twiceborn. Our second 5Ps that we're running right now on our off bar is Infallible Aether. We're using 2 sharpened swords, 1 spell damage enchanted, 1 fire damage enchanted, and the jewelry, all spell damage enchanted. Now this is not best in slot. It's not a DPS loss, but everyone does recommend using Moondancer over Aether. So if you can have 2 sharpened Moondancer swords or a sharpened and precise Moondancer sword with Moondancer jewelry, do use that over Infallible Aether. It is more damage, it is better. Our main bar is our Maelstrom Inferno staff. It is sharpened. Don't use anything other than sharpened. It is a big DPS loss. And then for the monster set, instead of running Grathar, because we are going to be ranged, we have to use Scoria. Scoria still does a ton of damage, gives you that extra health, which is very nice while running Burning Spellweave, and does do a lot. So use Scoria when you're playing ranged. Let's get into the skills. Our main bar, our Destro bar, is Inner Light, Blockade of Fire, Reflective Light, Dark Flare, Puncturing Sweeps, and Shooting Star. Inner Light, obvious, 5% plus 2% from the passive Max Magicka. Blockade of Fire is one of the strongest dots in the game, so obviously keep that up the whole time. Now here's the nice thing about Blockade. You can use the other morph while playing a ranged DPS Templar. Reason being, all of our dots are 6 seconds. And the Exploding Blockade also lasts 6 seconds and does damage when it explodes. So if you want to remorph that, I do highly recommend that if you're playing purely ranged based Blockade of Fire. Big credit to Attacko for discovering, kind of putting me on that. Reflective Light, it's a strong single target and AoE dot, hits up to 3 enemies. And Dark Flare is our damage filler, which is our main spammable while the dots are up. It also grants Empower for our Purifying Light, which we'll go over in a second. And then Puncturing Sweeps are mainly here for the Piercing Spear passive, which increases your crit strikes by 10%. We don't really use this much because we are going to be mainly playing ranged, but when you're able to get in close, it does do great damage, especially when there's more than one target up. Lastly, our Shooting Star, we do need extra max magic on our front bar. You can swap this out for the Destro ulti. It's very strong, but in long boss fights, use Meteor for sure. Our off bar, again, Inner Light. Now if you don't know why I'm double barring Inner Light again, there's still a bug with Major Prophecy. So if you take it off, even if you're using a pot, you will lose the crit buff on this bar if you switch bars. So double bar inner light on all magic classes until they fix that bug. Purifying light. Not only is this a nice DPS ability that can crit and can be empowered, but it also provides healing. I heal over time. It says healing nearby allies for 2500 health every 2 seconds for 6 seconds. So it is a pretty strong heal and a very, very strong burst. Radiant Oppression, that's a no-brainer. We always use this. Any Templar that doesn't use it must be crazy. Harness Magicka. Now this is a debatable skill. You can, if you want to go pure damage, you can swap this out for Rearming Trap. I do on all fights except for the hard mode and bosses. All the other times I do run Rearming Trap instead of Harness. But for Harness, for example, when you're doing a hard mode Aetherian Archive, a hard mode Hellra, or hard mode Vet Maw, you need Harness Magicka. Trust me, you do. Lastly, our Blazing Spear. This is our starter. This is our rotation starter basically, and it does proc Burning Light because we're not using sweeps, which is a 25% chance to cause extra physical or magic damage, whichever is higher. And sometimes our Burning Light procs crit for over 15k, so make sure you keep this in your rotation. And again, Shooting Star for the max magic. Going into the CP. The CP still hasn't changed from a ranged to a melee Templar. Still using 100 into Magician, 87 Arcanist, 100 Elemental Expert, 51 Elf-Born, 1 Spell Erosion, and 35 Thaumaturge. Again, I cannot take credit for these champion point allocations because they are given to me by Alcast. He said it works really, really well, so I do trust him on that. And then lastly, our red tree. Again, it's very, very situational. I like to keep 27 points in a Bastion always when I do use a shield, but these are very situational. Sometimes these are safe for any trial, but for Maw of Larkaj, for example, or Aetherian Archive, I like to put 100 onto Elemental Defender, 27 into Hardy, 33 Thick Skin. For trials like Sanctum or Hellra, I do either an even split or a little bit more points into Hardy because there's a lot of physical and poison damage in those trials. But again, CP is completely situational, so do know what you're running and what you need to run. Let's take a look at the ranged Templar DPS rotation. So we start by empowering our Meteor by using Inner Light. Then our Meteor drop empowers the heavy attack, and then we start our rotation. Blazing Spear, Purifying Light, Blockade, Reflective Light, Light Weaves between everything, and then 1 Dark Flare to empower the Purifying Light right before it pops right there. Then the shard lands and we start over. So the rotation is very, very simple. It's Shard, Purifying Light, Blockade, Reflective Light, 1 Dark Flare, with light attack weaves between every single skill. Now notice how I'm using Channeled Focus. You don't need to have that on your bar. This is simply so I can sustain better without too much group support in this fight. Usually I would never have that on my bar. That would be replaced with either Harness Magicka for a ranged fight, or Rearming Trap if I can get in close and the fight allows me to. Now the same thing again as I talked about in the previous video about when to use Radiant over our regular rotation. Once you see the boss go below 41%, so 40 or lower, you simply keep up your dots, your main 2 dots, which are Blockade and Reflective Light, and then you just spam Beam. 3 beams, then Blockade, Reflective Light, and beams. When the boss hits 20% or lower, you simply have to hit the beam button, and that is it on a ranged Templar. For AoE situations, the most important thing to keep up is your Blockade, your Reflective Light, and you can literally spam spears if there are 3 or more adds in the fight. So again, keeping up Blockade and Reflective Light at 40% or lower, using Meteor on cooldown, and then once the boss is at 20% or lower, you just spam beam and enjoy the DPS that you're putting out. And that's pretty much it for the rotation. It's pretty simple. If you can keep it up, your animation canceling is good. You don't really actually need to animation cancel on a ranged DPS Templar because the skills all fall into place and are perfectly timed without animation canceling, but you do add slightly more damage if you do want to animation cancel. Things like reflective light or purifying light with a bar swap or blazing spear does add a little bit of damage, but it's not that important. I hope the rotation is clear. If you have any questions, please do post in the comment section below. So just to conclude this video, again, this is a really nice option for ranged DPS. The Magicka Templar, if played correctly from range, can easily do just as much, if not more, than a Magicka sorc who's ranged, and definitely more damage than a Magicka nightblade dispatch who's ranged as well. So if you master this rotation, have the right gear, you're going to do a ton of damage even as a ranged DPS. It's also very fun to play, a unique build, so I hope you do enjoy it. Hope you liked the video, hope this helps you, and see you next time. Bye bye.